My name is Angela Reed. I'm 50 years old. At 2:16 on a Friday afternoon in May, while I was sitting across from a closing attorney with a blue folder open in front of him, my brother called me greedy in a Facebook post. Not privately, not in a heated text, not after one honest conversation where feelings sometimes outrun judgment, publicly. He wrote, "Some people wait until grandma dies, then sell the family home out from under everyone. Greed changes people. Remember who kept the memories alive and who cashed them out." Under it, my sister Claire commented, "Exactly. Some of us wanted to preserve grandma's legacy." Angela only saw dollar signs. Then my youngest brother, Mark, added, "She never cared about that house unless there was money involved." I read the posts on my phone, while the attorney, Mr. Daniel Pierce, reviewed final sale documents for the house on Maple Street. Grandma's house. White siding. Green shutters. A sagging front porch we repaired 3 times. 2 maple trees in the yard. A kitchen that smelled like cinnamon, coffee, and old wood. The house where we spent Christmas mornings, Easter dinners, summer sleepovers, card games, arguments, apologies, and the last Thanksgiving before Grandma forgot my name. The house my siblings were now accusing me of selling because I was selfish. I sat very still. That had become my specialty. Stillness while other people performed outrage. Across from me, Mr. Pierce looked up over his glasses. "Mrs. Reed?" I placed the phone face down on the table. "I'm listening." He studied my face for half a second, then glanced toward the conference room door. My siblings had not arrived yet. They were late, which was fitting, because lateness had been their main contribution to the house for the last decade. The buyers had already signed. The proceeds were ready to be distributed, according to the title records and the agreement my grandmother had signed years before she died. The house was legally mine to sell because Grandma had transferred it to me before her final decline, after my siblings refused responsibility for repairs, taxes, insurance, utilities, code violations, and the long, slow cost of keeping an old house standing. But my family preferred the story where Angela stole Grandma's legacy. It was easier than admitting Angela had paid for that legacy every year while they posted holiday photos on the porch. I looked at the phone again. More comments had appeared. Aunt Paula wrote, "This is heartbreaking. Your grandmother would never have wanted the house sold." My cousin Beth wrote, "Didn't Angela inherit it?" "Still seems cold." Claire replied, "Inherited because she manipulated Grandma when she was vulnerable. That one made my hand tighten. Manipulated." I thought of Grandma sitting at her kitchen table at 87, hair pinned back, glasses low on her nose, checkbook open, property tax bill beside her, looking at the 3 adult grandchildren who claimed they loved that house and saying, "If everyone loves it so much, someone can pay for it." No one had answered, except me. For 10 years, I paid the property taxes. For 10 years, I paid the homeowner's insurance. For 10 years, I paid the utilities when the house sat empty after Grandma moved to assisted living. For 10 years, I paid plumbers, roofers, electricians, lawn crews, pest control, furnace repair, porch repair, gutter cleaning, winterization, city code fees, legal filing fees, and 1 emergency bill after a pipe burst in January because Mark promised to check the heat and forgot. But online, I was selfish, greedy, cold, a thief of memories. Mr. Pierce cleared his throat gently. "Angela, I should tell you something before your family arrives." I looked at him. "Yes?" I reviewed the tax history, as requested. "Thank you. It is extensive." "I know." He tapped the folder. The unpaid property tax notices from before your payments began, the delinquency warnings, the redemption deadlines, the payment receipts, and the escrow corrections are all here. So are the insurance lapse notices and the lien release. I nodded. "Good." Mr. Pierce's expression softened. "I assume they don't know the full history." They were told. That is not the same as knowing. No, it was not. What my siblings did not know was that Grandma had kept copies of everything. What they did not know was that before she transferred the house to me, her attorney had documented why, because I was the only one paying the carrying costs, and because the house had nearly been lost to tax delinquency twice. What they did not know was that the closing attorney was required to read certain title and tax items aloud because Claire's attorney had sent a hostile letter suggesting elder manipulation. What they did not know was that their own emails from 10 years ago were in the file. Claire, I can't afford taxes on a house I don't live in. Stephen, I'm not paying for sentimental property. Mark, let it go to tax sale if it's such a burden. Let it go to tax sale. My brother had written that. Then later posted that I sold Grandma's legacy. The conference room door opened at 2:31. Claire came in first, wearing a cream blazer and the expression of a woman already prepared to be offended. Stephen followed, phone in hand, jaw tight. Mark came last, sunglasses on his head, smelling faintly of cigarettes, an expensive cologne he could somehow afford, while never affording property taxes. Behind them came Aunt Paula, invited by Claire as a family witness, though she had not paid $1 toward the house either. Claire looked at me. I hope you're proud of yourself. I smiled softly. I hope you read before you sign. Stephen scoffed. Always the paperwork martyr. Mr. Pierce closed the blue folder, placed both hands on top of it, and said, before anyone signs final distribution acknowledgments, we need to address the property tax history. Claire's face shifted. What tax history? I looked at my phone one last time. The comments were still coming. I turned it off. Then Mr. Pierce opened the folder and began reading. This is that story. Before I tell you how my family learned that the house they called a legacy had been one unpaid tax bill away from auction before I stepped in, tell me where you are watching or listening from, and what time it is there. I always wonder who hears stories like this while remembering the moment relatives loved an inheritance only after someone else paid to keep it. And if you connect with stories about women who were blamed, erased, used, and quietly took their power back, like and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Some women do not fight in Facebook comments. Some women let the closing attorney read the tax history aloud. I grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania, in a working-class family where love was often measured by who showed up with a casserole and who disappeared when the invoice arrived. My grandmother, Ruth Whitman, lived on Maple Street for 52 years. My grandfather bought the house in 1968, when the neighborhood was full of young families, porch swings, bicycles, and mothers shouting children's names from screen doors. By the time I was old enough to remember it, the house already felt permanent. Grandma's lace curtains, Grandpa's old radio in the garage, the smell of cinnamon rolls on Saturday mornings, the pantry shelf with canned peaches, the back bedroom where cousins slept in mismatched blankets during holidays. Grandpa died when I was 15, a heart attack in the driveway after shoveling snow he had been told not to shovel. Grandma stayed in the house. She said, "This house knows my steps." I understood that. Maple Street became the center of the family after Grandpa died. Christmas Eve there, Easter there, birthdays there, Sunday dinners there when Grandma still had the energy to cook for 12 and complained that nobody ate enough. We all loved the house then, because children love places that ask nothing from them except to remember. There were 4 of us grandchildren in the main branch of the family. Claire, my older sister. Pretty, polished, dramatic, always able to turn responsibility into an emotional injury. Me, Angela. The middle daughter, practical, careful, the one who noticed when Grandma's gutters sagged, when her steps iced over, when her bills piled up under the fruit bowl. Stephen, my younger brother. Charming, sarcastic, good at opinions, allergic to commitments, and Mark, the youngest. The baby of the family at 39, still somehow treated like a promising boy despite 2 divorces, 3 failed businesses, and a history of borrowing money from women he later called controlling. Grandma loved all of us, but she understood us differently. She called Claire sparkly. She called Stephen slick. She called Mark unfinished. She called me steady. When I was young, steady felt like a dull compliment. Later, I learned it was one of the highest forms of trust. The symbolic object in this story was Grandma's property tax envelope. Every March, a thick white envelope came from the county treasurer. Grandma kept it in the top drawer of her kitchen desk beside stamps, rubber bands, church envelopes, and a magnifying glass with a cracked handle. When Grandpa was alive, he handled property taxes. After he died, Grandma did, carefully, with a check written in blue ink and the memo line filled out in her precise handwriting. I first noticed the envelope when I was 22. Grandma was at the table, frowning at the bill. "Taxes went up again," she said. I was visiting after work, still in my receptionist uniform from the insurance office, where I had started before moving into claims management. "Can you pay it?" She gave me a look. "I can pay anything if I stop eating." "Grandma." She waved me off. "I'm being dramatic. Your sister says it keeps me youthful." I sat down beside her. "Let me look." That was how it began. Not with inheritance, not with control, with a bill. Over the next few years, I helped Grandma organize paperwork. Taxes, insurance, utility accounts, Medicare notices, home repair receipts. Nothing dramatic. Just the paperwork of aging in a house that needed more every year. My siblings visited for holidays. They loved the house loudly. Claire posted pictures from the porch every Christmas. Stephen told stories about Grandpa's garage. Mark slept in the guest room whenever his life fell apart and left laundry in the washer like a memorial to irresponsibility. I cleaned gutters, called plumbers, scheduled furnace service, drove Grandma to the bank, paid contractors when she could not find the checkbook. When I married Paul at 30, Grandma hosted a small family brunch at the house the morning after. Paul loved her immediately. He was a quiet man, a school maintenance supervisor, practical in the way good men are when they know the difference between helping and taking over. He saw early what my family did. "You carry a lot for them," he said once after watching Claire leave Thanksgiving dinner early while I washed roasting pans. I said, "It's just family." He dried a plate. That sentence can hide a crime scene. I laughed then. I should have written it down. Paul and I had no children. Not by choice at first, then by biology, then by acceptance. I poured love into work, nieces and nephews, my marriage, my garden, and Grandma. My siblings sometimes acted like not having children meant I had extra time, extra money, extra emotional space, extra everything. No one ever called their lack of availability selfish. Only mine. Grandma's health declined gradually. Arthritis first, then vision problems, then a small stroke at 83. She recovered enough to stay home with help, but the house became harder. Stairs, laundry in the basement, snow, yard work, old pipes, drafty windows, insurance premiums rising because the roof needed replacement. The first serious tax problem happened the year Grandma turned 85. She had missed the payment deadline, not intentionally. The bill had fallen behind the desk drawer. The county sent a delinquency notice. Grandma was embarrassed and tried to hide it. I found it while looking for her insurance card. The amount with penalties was $4, $812. Grandma cried. That frightened me more than the bill. Grandma did not cry over money. She became sharp, funny, stubborn. But that day, she sat at the kitchen table and said, "Your grandfather would be ashamed." I knelt beside her. "No, he wouldn't. I've kept this house all these years. You still have. I can't keep up." That was the first time she admitted it. I called my siblings. Not a group text. Calls. Claire said, I would help, but we're still paying off the kitchen remodel. Stephen said, why is she still in that house if she can't afford it? Mark said, I'm between things right now. Between things was Mark's permanent address. I asked each of them for $1,000. No one sent anything. Paul and I paid the delinquent tax bill. We took it from our emergency fund and skipped the vacation we had planned to Maine. I told myself it was temporary. Family would help next time. Grandma would repay us slowly. Things would stabilize. That is how caretakers lie to themselves. In gentle installments. The second tax problem came 2 years later. Worse this time. Grandma had moved into assisted living after another fall. Maple Street sat empty except for family visits and my weekly checks. The house still needed taxes, insurance, utilities, heat, basic maintenance, lawn care, snow removal, and repairs to avoid code violations. Everyone said we could not sell it yet. Too soon. Too emotional. Grandma might want to go back. The grandchildren needed a place to gather. The holidays would not be the same. But when I asked who would pay the carrying costs, the room went quiet. We held a family meeting in Grandma's kitchen. I remember the exact day, October 12th. Rain against the windows. A bowl of stale candy corn on the table. The property tax envelope in the center like a small white bomb. Grandma sat at the head of the table with her cane beside her chair. Claire, Stephen, Mark, Aunt Paula, Paul, and I sat around her. I had printed a spreadsheet. Taxes. Insurance. Utilities. Lawn. Snow. Repairs. Minimum annual carrying cost. $11, $300. More if something broke. Claire sighed when I passed it around. Angela, must everything be a spreadsheet? Yes, I said, when it costs $11,000. Stephen leaned back. I'm not paying for an empty house. I said, then we sell. Claire gasped. We are not selling Grandma's house. Grandma looked at her. Then you pay. Claire's mouth opened, closed. Mark said, maybe we rent it. I looked at him. Who will manage the rental, repairs, tenants, insurance change, taxes, and city inspections? He shrugged. Someone. I said, someone is usually me. Paul squeezed my hand under the table. Aunt Paula said, maybe everyone can contribute what they can. Good, I said. What can you contribute? Silence. Grandma watched all of us. Then she said, this house is not a feeling, it has bills. No one looked at her. Stephen finally said, if it's such a burden, maybe let it go to tax sale. Grandma's face changed. So did mine. Paul sat up straighter. Claire snapped, Stephen. He held up his hands. I'm saying if nobody can pay, what do you want? Grandma's voice went cold. I want honesty. That meeting ended with no agreement. Except one. I would pay the current taxes just this year, and we would revisit. Just this year lasted 10 years. Grandma transferred the house to me 2 years later. Not secretly, not suddenly, with an attorney. After 3 written notices to family, asking whether anyone else wanted to assume taxes, insurance, maintenance, and legal responsibility. No one responded except Claire, who wrote that she supported preserving the house in family spirit, but could not take on financial obligations. Family spirit. Free, apparently. Grandma's attorney, Mr. Lang, prepared the transfer. The house came to me with a note from Grandma, Angela. A house is not kept by memories. It is kept by the person who pays the bills, calls the repairman, and checks the pipes in winter. You have done that. If the others want a legacy, they may start by preserving one somewhere else. Love. Grandma, I still have that note, folded in the property tax folder. After the transfer, my siblings behaved as if nothing had changed, except that they now had someone to blame officially. They still expected holiday access. They still wanted to use the house for family gatherings. They still asked to store furniture in the garage. Mark still asked to stay there during transitions, which usually meant fights with girlfriends. I allowed too much. That is the truth. I let Claire host Easter there because she said Grandma would want it. I let Stephen use the garage for tools. I let Mark stay there for 6 weeks after his second divorce, and he left cigarette burns on the porch railing and a broken cabinet hinge. I paid. Taxes, insurance, utilities, repairs. I kept records. Every year, the property tax envelope arrived. Every year, I paid it. Sometimes from savings, sometimes from a bonus. Once from a home equity line Paul and I took out after the roof failed, and insurance refused part of the claim. Paul never complained, but I knew it wore on him. One night after a plumbing bill for $3,900, he sat across from me at our kitchen table and said, Angela, we are paying a mortgage on a memory. I looked at him. I know. Do you want to keep doing this? No. Then why are we? I did not have a good answer. Because Grandma was still alive. Because my siblings would call me heartless. Because Maple Street had history. Because I had become the person who kept things from collapsing, and I did not know who I would be if I let something end. Paul died 3 years later. Cancer. Fast and vicious. For 6 months, my whole life became hospitals, medication, insurance calls, and the terrible intimacy of watching a man you love become smaller inside his own body. My siblings visited once or twice. Claire brought soup. Steven sent a gift card. Mark texted, "Thinking of you," then asked a week later if he could borrow Grandma's house for a weekend. I did not answer. After Paul died, I almost sold Maple Street. I met with a realtor, then Grandma declined sharply, and I could not handle 2 endings at once, so I kept paying. Grandma died at 91, peacefully, in her sleep, with one hand under her cheek like a child. The funeral was beautiful. Everyone cried. Everyone told stories about Maple Street. Claire talked about cinnamon rolls. Steven talked about Grandpa's garage. Mark talked about sleeping in the back bedroom during storms. Aunt Paula said the house was the heart of the family. I stood near Grandma's casket and listened while calculating the unpaid furnace service bill due the next week. That is what responsibility does to grief. It makes room for invoices. After Grandma died, the pressure changed shape. Suddenly, the house became sacred again. Claire wanted to host one last Christmas. Steven wanted to take our time. Mark wanted to figure out a family arrangement. Aunt Paula said selling too soon would be disrespectful. I said, I am selling in the spring. The room erupted. Claire cried. Steven called me cold. Mark said, of course, now that Grandma's gone, you can cash out. I looked at him. Mark, you once said, let it go to tax sale. He looked away. That was years ago. Yes, I remember years. Claire said, you don't need the money. There it was, need. The family currency used to decide who deserved what belonged to me. I said, I need to stop paying for a house everyone loves and no one supports. Steven scoffed. You act like you're the only one who cares. No, I'm the only one who pays. He said, same thing to you. I let that sit, because maybe it was. The online campaign began after I signed with the realtor. It started with vague posts. Claire, heartbroken watching family history treated like real estate. Steven, some people inherit responsibility and sell it. Mark, Grandma deserved better. Then came comments. Aunt Paula, I know your grandmother would be devastated. Cousin Beth, can no one buy Angela out? Claire, we tried. She only wants top dollar. They had not tried. Steven suggested paying me over time, with no down payment, no financing, and no written plan. Mark offered to manage it as a rental, despite having no job at the time. Claire said her family might use it as a holiday house if I kept things flexible. Flexible meant I would pay until they felt nostalgic. I stopped responding online. Instead, I prepared the file. Because once you have spent years being called dramatic for telling the truth, you learn to bring documentation before opening your mouth. The file had sections: property tax receipts, insurance payments, repair invoices, utility bills, code notices, snow removal, lawn care, roof replacement, plumbing, furnace, pest control, Grandma's transfer documents, attorney letters to siblings, their email refusals, Steven's tax sale message, Claire's family spirit email, Mark's not in a position to contribute texts. Total paid over 10 years, $137, $860. That number did not include my time. It did not include driving 40 minutes each way to check pipes. It did not include cleaning after family gatherings. It did not include clearing raccoon damage from the attic because Steven had left the garage side door unlatched. It did not include Paul's worry. It did not include my grief. Just dollars. $137,860. The house sold quickly. Old houses with character attract buyers, who do not yet understand old houses with character also attract contractors. A young couple bought it. Olivia and James. They loved the porch, the kitchen built-ins, the maple trees. Olivia cried when she saw the pantry because it reminded her of her grandmother's house. I liked them immediately. That helped. The closing was scheduled for May 17th. My siblings insisted on attending because Claire had sent a letter through a friend of a friend who was an attorney, suggesting that Grandma had been pressured into transferring the house to me, and that proceeds should be, quote, equitably discussed. Mr. Pierce, the closing attorney, reviewed everything and invited them to be present for explanation, not negotiation. That distinction mattered. They thought they were coming to challenge me. They were coming to be educated. At 2:31, they entered the conference room. By 2:36, Mr. Pierce began. This property was transferred to Angela Reed by Ruth Whitman through a properly executed deed dated 10 years prior. The transfer was prepared by counsel, notarized, recorded, and not challenged within any applicable period. The sale today is valid. Claire's lips tightened. We understand legal ownership. We're talking about family fairness. Mr. Pierce nodded. Then we should review financial history. Stephen muttered, "Here we go." Mr. Pierce opened the tax section. The county records showed delinquency notices issued in March and September of the year before Mrs. Reed began paying. The property had accrued penalties and was approaching tax sale eligibility. Aunt Paula looked confused. What? I looked at Stephen. He looked at the table. Mr. Pierce continued. Payment of $4,812 was made by Angela Reed and Paul Reed to cure the delinquency. Claire said, "That was one bill." Mr. Pierce turned a page. Subsequent property tax payments were made by Angela Reed annually for 10 years. Total property taxes paid, $52,430. Mark leaned back. That seems high. I said, taxes often due when you don't pay them. He glared at me. Mr. Pierce continued. Homeowners insurance premiums paid by Angela Reed during the same period, $18,960. Utility costs to maintain heat, water, and electricity, $21,740. Documented repairs and maintenance, $44,730. Total documented carrying costs, $137,860. The room went silent. Aunt Paula whispered, "Angela." Claire recovered first. No one asked her to spend that much. I almost laughed. Mr. Pierce opened another section. Several written requests were sent to family members asking whether they wished to assume or share carrying costs. He read from the first. Claire Mills' response. I support preserving the house and family spirit, but we cannot take on financial obligations at this time. He read the second. Stephen Whitman response. I am not paying for sentimental property. Sell it or stop complaining. Stephen's face reddened. That was taken out of context. Mr. Pierce glanced at the page. It is the full sentence. Mark shifted. Mr. Pierce read the third. Mark Whitman text message. Let it go to tax sale if it's such a burden. Aunt Paula turned toward him. Mark. He looked down. That was 10 years ago. Mr. Pierce said, yes, the record spanned 10 years. Beautiful. Claire's voice shook. We loved that house. I looked at her. Love did not pay the taxes. She turned on me. You always do this. You keep score. I nodded. Yes, when I pay, I keep receipts. Stephen said, you're acting like we did nothing. I looked at him. No, the records are acting like that. Mr. Pierce cleared his throat. There is also the matter of public statements alleging greed, manipulation, and elder coercion. Mrs. Reed has requested that I clarify the deed transfer circumstances. Claire's eyes flashed. You requested that? Yes, I said. Mr. Pierce read Grandma's attorney memo. Mrs. Whitman states that Angela Reed has been the sole family member consistently paying property expenses and arranging maintenance. Mrs. Whitman wishes to transfer title to Angela Reed because Angela has prevented tax loss of the property and is the only person willing to assume ongoing obligations. Mrs. Whitman confirms she is acting voluntarily and understands that other family members may disagree. He then read Grandma's signed statement. If my family wants the house, they can pay for it. Angela has. That is why it goes to her. My throat tightened. I had not heard that line aloud before. Claire stared at the table. Stephen rubbed his face. Mark said nothing. Aunt Paula began crying quietly. Mr. Pierce closed the folder. The sale proceeds belong to Angela Reed as legal owner. There is no distribution to siblings required by title, estate, or agreement. Mrs. Reed has chosen to pay certain final family-related expenses from proceeds, including reimbursement to the estate for personal items and a donation to Mrs. Whitman's church library. That is voluntary. Claire looked up. Voluntary? Yes, I said. That means I can stop. She had no answer. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever been called greedy by people who only loved something after you paid to keep it, you know exactly what that conference room felt like. It was not about selling a house, it was about finally reading the cost of everyone else's nostalgia out loud. If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment and tell me what you paid for while others called it family. And if you have not already, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. The quiet part is over. The closing finished in silence. My siblings signed acknowledgement forms confirming they had received explanation and had no ownership interest. Claire signed like the pen had insulted her. Stephen barely looked at me. Mark asked if he could have a few things from the garage before the buyers took possession. I said no. He looked offended. There are Grandpa's tools. You had 10 years to care about the garage. That's cold. No, it is closed. Mr. Pierce pressed his lips together as if hiding a smile. After the closing, I stood in the parking lot with the proceeds receipt in my purse and no sense of victory. People imagine justice feels like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion finally finding a chair. Aunt Paula approached me first. Her face was wet. I didn't know, she said. You didn't ask. She nodded. I know, I should have. Yes. I'm sorry I commented online. Take it down. I will. Post a correction. She looked startled. A correction? Yes. You said Grandma would be devastated. Now you know Grandma signed the transfer and why. Her mouth trembled. I will. That mattered. Not because I wanted humiliation. Because lies travel farther when no one makes them walk back. Stephen walked past without speaking. Mark muttered something under his breath. Claire stopped in front of me. You got what you wanted. I looked at her. No, Claire. What I wanted was help 10 years ago. Her face changed. For 1 second, something like shame entered. Then pride shut the door. You could have reminded us. I smiled sadly. I did. She shook her head. You always make yourself the martyr. No, you made me the payer. I just kept the receipts. She walked away. I drove to Maple Street after the closing. The buyers would take possession the following week. The house was empty now, echoing, clean. Stripped of family furniture, framed photos, holiday dishes, and the clutter that had once made it feel alive. I stood on the porch and placed my hand on the railing. Paul had repaired that railing 7 years earlier. He had sanded it in late September, while Grandma sat in a lawn chair criticizing his technique. You missed a spot, she said. He looked at me and whispered, I married into supervision. Grandma laughed so hard she spilled lemonade. I could hear it in the boards. Inside, sunlight fell across the living room floor. The kitchen cabinets were bare, the pantry shelves empty. The bedroom where Grandma died had been painted by the buyer's request, a soft, warm white. The garage smelled like dust and motor oil. I walked from room to room saying goodbye. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Thank you for holding us. Thank you for holding her. Thank you for holding more than you should have. In the kitchen, I opened the drawer where Grandma used to keep the tax envelope. Empty. For the first time in 10 years, there was no bill waiting there. I cried then. Not because I regretted selling. Because relief and grief had finally met in the same room. I thought of Grandma saying, this house is not a feeling. It has bills. She was right. But it had feelings, too. That was what made selling it hard. Not my siblings, judgment, not the posts, the feelings. The last time I locked the front door, I pressed the key into my palm until it hurt. Then I drove home. By evening, Aunt Paula had posted, I owe Angela an apology. I commented earlier without knowing the full history of Ruth's house. Angela paid the property taxes, insurance, utilities, and repairs for 10 years and prevented the house from being lost. Ruth transferred the house to her knowingly and voluntarily. I was wrong to suggest otherwise. The comments shifted quickly. Beth wrote, I'm sorry too. I didn't know. A cousin from Ohio wrote, 10 years? That's not greed, that's stewardship. Claire did not comment. Stephen deleted his original post. Mark did not. So I commented under it with one sentence. You wrote, "Let it go to tax sale if it's such a burden," when asked to help pay the taxes. Then I attached a screenshot. He deleted the post in 3 minutes. Some people only understand truth when it threatens their audience. The family did not heal quickly. It still has not fully healed. Claire did not speak to me for 4 months. Stephen sent a text that said, "Sorry things got heated," which is an apology only if you have low standards. Mark asked through Aunt Paula if he could buy Grandpa's tool chest, which I had already donated to a vocational program in Paul's name. He was furious. Good. Grandma would have liked the vocational program. Grandpa too. I used part of the sale proceeds to pay off the home equity line Paul and I had taken to repair Maple Street. I used part to establish a small scholarship at the local trade school for students going into home repair or maintenance. I named it the Paul and Ruth Stewardship Fund. Paul, because he helped me carry what was never his responsibility. Ruth, because she taught me that love without maintenance is sentiment. I kept enough to stabilize my own life. A new roof on my house. Retirement catch-up. A trip to Maine I had postponed more than once. When I finally stood on the Rocky Coast 6 months later, I thought about the first tax bill Paul and I paid instead of going there. I carried his old flannel in my suitcase, folded at the bottom like a private flag. I bought coffee from a little shop near the harbor and sat watching waves break against black rocks. For the first time in years, no house needed me. No pipes, no gutters, no tax envelope, no sibling outrage, just sea wind and my own breath. I whispered, "We made it, Paul." The wind took the words. That was fine. They were not for anyone else. Claire eventually came around in the strangest way. She asked to meet at a coffee shop in January. I expected anger. She arrived without makeup, which for Claire was almost a confession. "I found Grandma's letter," she said. I frowned. What letter? The one she sent me after the transfer. I never opened it. Of course she had not. She pulled a folded envelope from her purse, worn at the edges. Grandma's handwriting. Claire, you love the idea of Maple Street, but Angela loves it in ways that cost her. There is a difference. Do not punish her for doing what you would not, Grandma. That was all. Claire had read it recently, she said, while cleaning out her desk. I was so angry when I found it, she admitted. At Grandma? At you, then at her, then at myself. I waited. She looked at me. I didn't want the house enough to pay for it. I wanted the feeling. Yes. And I wanted you to keep paying so I could keep the feeling. Yes. Tears filled her eyes. I'm sorry. I waited. For calling you greedy, for saying you manipulated Grandma, for posting online, for not helping. For making your grief harder after Paul and Grandma. That reached me. Not all the way. Enough. Thank you. She touched her coffee cup. I don't know how to fix this. You don't. You change going forward. What does that mean? It means when something costs money, time, labor, or emotional energy, you do not call it family unless you are willing to carry some of it. She nodded. I can try. Good. We are not close now, but we are more honest. Sometimes that is better than closeness built on denial. Stephen apologized at Thanksgiving. A real apology, surprisingly. He said, I was embarrassed that I didn't help, so I acted like you were wrong for caring about money. I said, that is accurate. He laughed once, then said, I'm sorry. Mark still believes he was misunderstood. Every family has one. I let him be misunderstood from a distance. The buyers sent me a Christmas card. Olivia and James on the porch, now painted deep blue. A wreath on the door. Their toddler, who had apparently arrived earlier than expected, sitting on the steps in a red hat. Inside, Olivia wrote, We love this house. Thank you for taking such good care of it before us. I cried over that card longer than I cried over most of my family's apologies. Because that was what I had needed to hear. Not that I kept the legacy. Not that I was selfless. Not that I was right. Just that the house had been cared for. It had. By me, by Paul, by Grandma, by Grandpa before us. And now by someone new. That is not betrayal. That is continuity. The final lesson is not, that selling a family house is easy? It is not. Houses hold voices, scratches on door frames, recipes in drawers, ghosts of birthday candles. The smell of someone's perfume in a closet long after the clothes are gone. Selling can feel like erasing, but sometimes keeping a house becomes another kind of erasure. Erasing your savings, your weekends, your marriage, your peace, your ability to grieve without a tax bill in your hand. My family called me selfish for selling Grandma's house. They forgot I paid the property taxes for 10 years. And when the closing attorney read the unpaid tax history aloud, when he read their refusals, when Grandma's own words entered the room, the truth finally stood where nostalgia had been sitting. I did not sell Grandma's legacy. I saved it from a tax sale. Then I let it become someone else's home before it finished consuming mine. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know some of you have been the one paying taxes, covering insurance, cleaning out houses, fixing roofs, cutting grass, calling plumbers, and holding family history together while everyone else offered opinions for free. If Angela's story reached you, I hope you remember that love has receipts when it costs you something. You are allowed to stop funding other people's nostalgia. You are allowed to sell what you alone have maintained. And you are allowed to let the record speak when the loudest people forget they never paid the bill. Subscribe to Ultimate Revenge for more stories about quiet women, family betrayal, silent comebacks, and the documents that finally tell the whole truth. So tell me, if your family called you selfish for selling Grandma's house after you paid the property, taxes, insurance, and repairs for 10 years, would you defend yourself online? Or would you let the closing attorney read every unpaid bill aloud?